खण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनं शलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुर्साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। So, seems to have been shuffling around. Some people are here, shifted here, like so. We stopped at a point where we said there are many different ways, of which there are 3 or 4 main approaches to understanding what we discussed before. Is that right? Right, no? My memory is not good. So we didn't cover, but we touched upon bhakti. We can't cover bhakti like that. But we touched upon it. Okay? Now, there are 2 more ways which are considered among the main approaches. One is what is called the Jnana Marga, or the way of, not the way of the thinker, but the way of one who inquires and tries to figure out what is all this happening. Prime example in contemporary times, but not right now, but a little before, was Ramana Maharishi. Now, so if you take up Ramana Maharishi, then you have a rough idea what it could mean. You know that, I'm sure you know, that Ramana Maharishi had no guru or teacher. At least we don't know anybody. And he was born a little different than other young boys, which was that he was mostly absorbed in himself from the beginning. And if he slept so deeply that it required a lot of shouting and shaking to wake him up. Otherwise, he had no yogic characteristics that we know of. I'm sure he was eating simple food and so on, because he was born in a family which had only simple food to eat anyway. So then, one day at the age of 15, now if you ask me, he had no guru, so I am also following Ramana Maharshi, then you are already accepting Ramana Maharshi as your guru. Or, if you say, therefore I also don't need a guru, I would say, you are not Ramana Maharshi. If you don't, it's good. What I am trying to say is that we don't know any known gurus of Ramana Maharshi, or anyone in this life that we know of, which means, here was the case of what the Gita calls a yoga bhrashta. One who has practiced inquiry into the truth, or maybe other practices to find it, to find the sat which we discussed in the morning, could not complete it fully and therefore came back to finish in a few years. So, at that point, if he had a guru or a teacher, we don't know. Perhaps he did. We see no known person, that's what I mean. Although there was a known person who looked after him when he was going through a particular stage of his sadhana. So anyway, so at the age of 16, 18, 17, I can't be sure of the exact date. There are many biographies, so you can check. Still in his teens, I know that. one afternoon he suddenly thought that he was going to die. Normally in teenage, you suddenly wake up thinking I have become a hero in Bollywood. He woke up thinking that I'm going to die. He's not afraid of it. It's not as if he had some kind of a maniac depression in which he thought I'm going to die. No, there was no signs of any aggression or agitation. He just lay down and said, I'm going to die. And what happens when people die? Lie down straight. He pretended to be a dead body. And then he suddenly realized that he could see the body there, but he was not dead. He was very much alive. The body was lying. He could actually see the body lying, but he was very much alive. So the thought occurred to him, if I am very much alive and the body is dead, I cannot be the body. I must be something else. So from that time started his search to figure out who he actually was and what is the essence of his being. Suppose we are wearing a colorful shirt like that. And then when I identify you now, I identify you with the shirt. I will say, who's this guy? Oh, that is the one that wears that flowery design. But when you go home, you go to sleep, you want to take it off, and you hang it in your cupboard. Are you the shirt or are you different from the shirt? Different. However, when you wear it, you are the same. You are identified by that. In the same way, Ramana Maharshi started thinking that if this is my body, it's like the clothes that one wears. It is mine. If it is mine, it cannot be me. It is mine, so it can't be me. This is the thought process that was going through his mind. Then he said, maybe I am the mind. Then he said to himself, the mind is mine, it belongs to me, so I must be different from the mind, and so on. And then he quietly wrote a letter, left it, and got out of the house. Not an encouragement for young people. What Ramana Maharshi did, don't think you are Ramana. And left the house. He wandered. He came to Thiruvananthapuram, he went up the hill, and all the time what was happening to him was that he was closing his eyes and he was going deep into the different layers of his self. Self meaning identity. Going deeper into his mind until he reached the essence of his being, where he realized that deep down, actually, he was in the inner core, he was merely consciousness, and not just confined to the body, but is expansive and universal. That was his discovery. It's about this that the great Adi Shankara, when he wrote Nirvana Shataka, the song of Nirvana, said, Chidananda Rupam, Shivoham, Shivoham, I am of the nature of bliss and consciousness. I am Shivam, I am Shivam. So Ramana Maharshi reached there by merely looking within himself. And now this is not so very easy. In Ramana Maharshi's case, I think he came kind of mostly prepared. As Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to say, if somebody came to him in his very light manner, he would knock him, poke him and say, not ready. No? So here came somebody, and in rare cases he would say, "Oh, Siddho." That means, in Bengali, Siddho means boiled potato. Nicely boiled. Cooked. So he was not just a Siddha, he was Siddho. Nicely cooked and properly done. So when he came, he was ready for that little bit, which was what? Peeling the skin. Try peeling the skin of a potato before boiling. It's more difficult than when it's boiled. Just push. So then he declared in 4 sentences the essence of all the texts and books of Vedanta which have been written for ages. He said it's like this: Deham, this body. Naham, I'm not. Koham, then who am I? Soham, I'm that. This is the way of enquiry which the Upanishads generally follow. In fact, there is an Upanishad which is called Who Upanishad. Who am I? So identity crisis is nothing new. It was 2000 years ago. Who am I? You don't have to really have a big fight with somebody to ask, who do you think you are? I remember there was an English movie called The Pink Panther. I don't know. Huh? The party, not Pink Panther. The party. The hero was Peter Sellers, this guy, small man. And in this movie, he's acting as an Indian musician, Indian. And his accent was so perfectly Indian English. So in one of these scenes, this is connected to who you are. So I'm saying, I am. He goes to a big place for a party, and he's searching around to find out where the washroom is, and he can find it. And it's terrible for him, it's very kind of urgent, and he goes here and there trying. And then he, by mistake, barges into a room where 2 big, huge Americans are having an affair. Naturally, the big man catches him by the collar and pulls him up this much. Looks at him and says, "Who do you think you are?" He says, "In India we don't think who we are, we know who we are." So, that was long ago, now we don't know who we are. So, anyway, so the Kena Upanishad, which is called the Who Upanishad, the word Keno in Sanskrit means who. It starts with a beautiful question asking, who, from whom comes the first impulse of the mind to think, thought, the first impulse of thought? What is it that gave the first impulse to life energy in the beginning? Who is it that, say, understands the meaning when one uses words? Who is it that sees when I say I see? And who is it that hears when I say I hear? Pyanesitam patachit prasitam manah kena prana prathama preti yuktaha kinesitam vacham imam vadanti chakshutshotram kaudeva yunakti. Who is that Deva, the God? Who is that being who hears all this when I use these instruments of perception? And then it goes on. Now, one probably would not even have thought about the process of perception, because it's so everyday affair I see something. I have not thought, how do I see something? When I see something, the image of the person or the thing that is in front of me goes through the lens of my eye into the retina. Because there is light, the light hits the object, it reflects, and then I get the image into my eye, which has a pair of convex lenses. I don't have contact, sorry. Pair of convex lenses here. Through that, the image goes with the ray of light, and then it touches the retina, where there are sensitive nerves there which take it to the optic nerve, and you say, what? Suppose I am not there. This can still happen if the eyes are open, because there are a pair of lenses. The image will certainly go into the retina, but there will be no registering there. Why? Because the mind is not there. Suppose I am looking at you, but I am thinking of the Himalayas. I am not seeing you then. Image is there, of course. I get the image of, but I am not recognizing it. I don't feel it, because my mind is in the Himalayas, even though my eyes are open here. It's the other way around also. If you are, your eyes are closed physically, you still see the Himalayas without the instruments of perception. So, the mind becomes more important than the organ of perception. Organ of perception is required, agreed. But who recognizes what the objects, what the instruments of perception see or feel or register? It is the conscious being which says, yeah, I see. I don't see. I feel. I don't feel. That is the core. First it is the mind. Now the mind also, from the point of view of Vedanta, the mind is not a spiritual thing. It's a subtle matter. Sankhya says that the subtlest part of the food that you eat goes to form the mind, so it must be the brain. Right? So, there must be a witness even for the mind. Something is even watching the mind. Here, for the time being, we'll say the brain. Of course, the brain is a complex, beautiful computer. Many of us have lovely computers with us, right? Laptops. What is the use of the laptop if I am not there to find out what's going on? Well, it's great. It can do complex things, but who recognizes it? Computer doesn't recognize. I recognize it. Consider the brain to be a very complex computer. Sometimes even better than what we have. Maybe after a while they'll have computers which are better than the brain. But the conscious element which it recognizes is not that. So somebody said, the eye, that which sees of this eye, is the mind. How wonderful it is to understand that in my true essence, I am also the eye of the mind that sees. So in this path, one goes slowly from the external to the internal while looking at what is the essence. Is this the essence of my being? Since we are on this subject, I want to tell you something which is part of my life. About light. If you have read my books, you might know here and there. But You know, Maheswarnath Babaji, who was my guru, refused to be photographed. I don't know whether I don't know whether he had likes or dislikes, but he didn't want any photographs. And since he knew that I was an amateur artist myself, he made sure that I wouldn't paint his portrait. But then I was very young, 19, 20 years, so I thought, he will say all that, but I need to get a photograph of his. How am I going to remember this? I must. So I conspired, to be honest. A terrible thing to do, but I conspired. I went to Lakshman Jhula, where if you cross the bridge, the hanging bridge, Lakshman Jhula, there's a lot of photographers standing there. So I went to one of these young fellows who came from Dehradun, and I told him, I want you to do something for me. He said, what do you want me? I said, I'll give you money and all that, but what do you want me to do? I said, in the evening in such and such a place in Rishikesh, on this side of the Ganga, on the steps where there is a kutir of Swami Shivananda, not in the ashram, it's on the opposite side, after the road. Nobody goes there usually. It's a quiet ghat, small. So that is a place where in the evening, Babaji and I used to cross on the boat. There was no bridge. And sit down, and I've learned many things on those, sitting in the steps of the ghat in the evenings. Many things. What I'm telling you is all that I've learned. There's nothing else. So, no PhD, no Sanskrit Vidyalaya, nothing. Anyway, so I told him, a couple of boats always come that way, so you come onto the other side. First go by boat to the other side, then in the evening around 5:30, come from there in a boat along with the other people who come. Don't show any sign that you know me, okay? Don't even recognize me. I'm like anybody else to you. You will find a man with matted hair tied up, tall and fair, sitting near me and talking. First I explain everything in detail. It's a conspiracy, like the KGB. So I said, it was exciting when I did it. So then you come in the boat, get off the boat, and then keep clicking everywhere. As if you're taking many pictures. And then zero in on this man sitting there. Take a couple of pictures, don't even look at me and carry on. I'll find you tomorrow. He said, okay. So, by the time it was 5:15, I think he knows what is happening. Because what if he says, today we are not crossing across? So I was waiting, he said, chalo chalte hain. So I said, okay, fine. My plan is going to work. So we got into the boat, we came across the river, and we sat there. Babaji started talking to me about something. Not something, about the Gita. And I was like Arjuna asking him questions. This can't be, and very patiently explaining. And I'm looking for the photographer. There many boats came, but this fellow is nowhere in sight. So then it became 6:30, like getting darker. So now even if he came, there was no use, not enough light. So Babaji looked at me, my restlessness and kind of my face, and he said, ये तुम्हारा जो फोटोग्राफर है वो नहीं आएगा आज. I said, Babaji, I'm very sorry. I forgot that before I thought about the photograph, you already thought about the photograph. I'm very sorry. I excused myself. I said, Babaji, I've been only with you for 1.5 years. I haven't understood you fully. He laughed. He said, हाँ सब ठीक है, but he won't come. Then he said, suppose he had come. Suppose he had come. Then he gave me a beautiful lesson on photography. That's why I'm telling you about how the light falls on an object and gets reflected onto the camera, the lens of the camera, and then goes to the screen, and then it's clicked. He said, what if the light which falls on me, the ray, it has to reflect to get the image. What if I did not allow it to reflect? What would happen? I said, Babaji, this is not possible. You and I are sitting here, the light falls on us equally. So I can't say, light, don't reflect. He said, suppose a cameraman had come, your man, he called him a cameraman. So the cameraman आया तो अपना lens खोला. He said, if the roshni, the light didn't reflect and go back, how will you get a photograph? I said, this is not possible, it will reflect. Acha, he said. And for a split second, I did not see him there. I mean, I saw him, but it was like just a black outline, like a silhouette. There was no detail of Babaji, nothing. It's only for a second it lasted and it came back. I rubbed my eyes, I thought something happened to me. Then he said, this could have happened even if he came. I don't want my photographs. Acha, I said, okay, fine. I said, many times I sought pardon from him for doing this senseless thing. And I said, I won't repeat it again. So he said, okay. Still he didn't tell me anything about the photograph. I waited the next day, then the third day I slowly in the morning, I had a time allotted for me to wander where I want. So I went to Maksman Jula. I knew this, I caught this fellow, he was there. I said, yeah, why didn't you come? He said, sir, kya bataye? I said, what happened? He said, it has never happened to me before. I got into a bus which I usually take from Dehradun. And by the time it reached halfway, there was a huge big sound and the driver said, iska axle toot gaya, sab log nikalo bahar. So I came out. Then I thought, it's about to be time, I must reach somehow. So in those days, these ambassadors used to go, like about 10, 15 people used to be stuffed into it. So he caught one fellow, somehow please push me in, and he got inside. He said, somewhere near Kailas Ashram, again a thud. And the driver says, axle toot gaya, niche utro sab. He said, then I didn't give up, I got into the fat, and by the time it was dark, completely dark. So I knew it was no use, so I went out and he said, I have a feeling that you didn't ask this Yogi ji that you're going to take a break. I said, you're right. He said, from now on don't make me do such criminal acts. What if he curses me? What will happen to me? I said, he's not a cursing type anyway, but sorry, okay, fine, leave it there. So, this is the process. You need light, when something is, I'm not going into the details, when you say this t-shirt is blue, it means the particular color of the spectrum is reflected by him, and the rest are all absorbed. If something is red, that spectrum which is red is reflected and the rest are all absorbed. This is what you see. And you think it is real, but it's actually the light of the sun, or artificial, whichever. So, to see that you're not, what happened? Is the Kundalini going up? He was doing like this, so he got one. So, apparently when the Kundalini goes up, some people crawl on all fours, some people make noises like crows, And some people jump, so I thought this is happening. Here the Kundalini doesn't do all that. It calms down. Anyway, so that is the way of the Jnana Marga. To find out, Shankara described it very beautifully by saying, Neti, Neti, not this, not this. What I am looking for is not this, it is not this. And finally, when you come to a stage where you can no longer say, not this, after negating every tangible object, when you come to an innegable substratum, that is your true self. And that true self, says Vedanta, is not different from the Supreme Being. Well, it's an amsha of the Supreme Being. I would like to say that, instead of saying the whole, but some part of it, let's say. An emanation. So that is one part. Then there is the, in general, one more which is called the Yogic Way. So since we are going to have Kriya and so on, we should have a little understanding of the Yogic Way, because this is part of yoga. Now what is yoga? Standing on your head, tying your body into knots, which is difficult to untie. What is yoga? Tantra says bhogo yogayate, yoga through bhoga. So what is yoga? Okay. It's an ancient science. It's more of a science than a philosophy. It generally, much of its terminology is derived from Sankhya, of Kapila, the great Muni Kapila, who Krishna says, among the Munis, I am Kapila. But then yoga became an independent darshana of its own. The most important propounder of yoga in an orderly way, rather texts also, was Patanjali. Patanjali was a man who actually made it so orderly and systematic and put it up in the form of sutras. Sutra meaning, sutra is aphorism. You need an interpreter to understand the sutra, because so many things are tied up in one sentence, for instance, one verse. So the great Patanjali codified. It brought the essence of the teachings of yoga, which of course were there before him. If you go to the Mandukya, if you go to the Mundaka, if you go to many of the Upanishads, there are mentions of yoga in different forms. But he codified it and made it a practical thing for you and me. And he brought it out in this little collection called the Yoga Sutras. Patanjala Yoga Sutras is also called Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga simply means that it is a yoga of 8 limbs, which was popularized in the West by B.K. Iyengar, the Ashtanga Yoga. People think that he is the founder of Ashtanga Yoga. Yeah, really. Once I went to a small little classroom, few people practicing Ashtanga Yoga in Wisconsin. All whites. So I asked them, okay, so do you know who the founder of Ashtanga is? Yeah, we all know who. B.K. Iyengar. I said, Patanjali must be turning in his grave. So, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It's beautiful because it's a practical system, step by step. No need to imagine anything. No need to speculate. It's a step-by-step way of trying to clear the muck which we were talking about of the mind and freeing it from all the conditionings and the adaptations that have taken place so that it remains pure. In that pure mind is reflected the self. So, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali starts with Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Here begins no other nonsense, nothing is there. Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Here begins the study of yoga. And then he goes on to say, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the overcoming or the calming down of all the vrittis of the chitta. Vritti, all the waves and disturbances. Chitta, the mind or the consciousness, awareness. See, when you sit down and close your eyes, see how many vrittis are there. Now, vrittis are also acquired in this life. We believe that some of them are acquired from the past. It is these vrittis which, like waves, which like if you drop a stone in a pool of water, first you get one ripple, then it spreads and spreads, and there are many ripples coming from it. The vrittis are like these ripples. They also are made up of our likes and dislikes, of our fear, for anger, of all the emotions that we go through. They're all part of the vrittis. Well, to live in this world, you need vrittis. Vrittis are very much required. You can't live otherwise. But if you want to find your true essence or source, you need to calm down the vrittis and finally wash them out. And then the mind becomes like a pond without any ripple whatsoever. And in that quiet, spotless, rippleless mind is reflected the consciousness. Actually, when this happens, there is no mind, there is only consciousness. So, Patanjali says to go there, you need to first get rid of the vrittis. Therefore, defines yogas, chitta vritti nirodha, cutting down of the vrittis. And then he describes different ways of doing it. The first chapter of the Yoga Sutras, of course, is a discussion on consciousness, and what is chitta, what is the essence of consciousness, and so on. And the meaning of the word samadhi. Now we know when you say samadhi, you think somebody is dead and buried. Samadhi ho gaya uska. Samadhi is when all the vrittis have vanished and the mind remains crystal clear and reflects the eternal consciousness. This is samadhi. So he goes about step by step, especially for practical people who want to know what will happen if I go from here to here, and slowly go, and also assess oneself as how one is moving forward. So, therefore, he says, the practice of yoga has 8 limbs. I'm discussing this because Kriya is also part of yoga. In fact, in the second chapter, Patanjali himself says this is Kriya Yoga. So, what is this? How do we go about? What are the 8 steps by which it's called Ashtanga? Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, have you reached? There is a difference between Shushupti and Turiya. So, Yama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, iva samyama. These are the 8 angas of yoga. When you start practicing yoga, there is no need even of a belief system. You can also do without it. It's up to you, but you can do also without it. For instance, the Buddhist philosophy is basically atheistic. There's no concept of Ishvara out there, but they have very good systems of yoga. So also the Jains. I think many of you probably don't realize that the Jains have no concept of Ishvara. There is no creator out there. If you tell them creator, they say, who created the creator? If everything has a cause and effect. And yet, they are among the most austere in their practices. They believe in ahimsa, they believe in purifying the mind so that the soul becomes free. They believe there is a soul, of course. So, yoga, therefore, is divided into yama, niyama, and so on. Now, yama, niyamas are the rules and regulations to be followed by the practitioner. To practice anything, you need some ground rules and regulations. You can't just go. Even in a scientific experiment, there are certain conditions which are required, for the experiment to succeed. Certain conditions, they are called laboratory conditions. In the same way, in this laboratory of yoga, you need certain conditions to practice before you can go further step by step. And yama niyamas are the rules and regulations of life to be followed by a practitioner so that he can go higher up. You cannot say, I will practice dhyana, I don't want yama niyamas. Not possible. Then it is not yoga. I will not practice yama niyamas. I would only practice dhyana. In the evening, I will not meditate. I will only sit in the bar and I will attain samadhi. Not possible. Yama niyamas are required. Rules and regulations. So, for these rules and regulations, there are many yama niyamas, but the most important ones we can actually say belong to what you can call no excess in anything. You can define it that way. In fact, in the Gita, Krishna defines it very simply by saying, this yoga is not for him who eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or sleeps too little. Which means you need to have a control over your activities and your thoughts. You don't have to neglect anything, but don't take anything to excess. The reason being that they want the body and the mind to become quiet and subtle and sensitive. For that this is essential. If you go into excesses, then the body is depleted. Either way, you know what happens when you all the time eat too much. What happens? Sleep. What happens when you don't eat at all? You can't even think. If I want to completely control you, I can ask you, 40 days don't eat anything, then come to me. Your mind is in a very sensitive state. I can say what I want and you will do what I want. Why? Because the mind has lost its capacity to think. So, don't starve. So, moderation in all activities. You need entertainment, I can understand. That doesn't mean you watch TV throughout the night. So, if some amount of control is required. So, basically, yama niyamas are that. To lead a balanced life, not fall on this side or fall on the other. And also, one of the important things mentioned in yama niyama is we need to discuss this because we are going to take, I think some at least are going to practice Kriya, which is part of yoga. First yama mentioned is ahimsa. And when you say ahimsa, it simply means that you are not a violent human being. You don't start looking at everything in that violent way. It's not so much of what you do than what you think. Your attitude is more important than even an action. Which means, as far as possible, don't cause injury to other living beings. I know it sometimes when you're sitting in deeply, today the meditation is so, then the mosquito bites you, you slap, dead. Okay, fine, no problem. Don't go back and wonder why I did it. Over. But you can avoid the mosquito if you're a little sensitive. Put a mesh and sit inside. What I mean to say is, there has to be, as far as possible, no feeling of ill will or hatred towards anybody. It's not easy to come by, because you already are like that, then you don't have to do any kriya, nothing is required, you're already there. But since we are beginners, we need to practice it deliberately to some extent. So that's why I keep saying, to the best extent possible. Now when you say don't cause injury to other living beings, please include human beings also in it. God's sake. I feed sugar to ants every day, but I don't mind bumping off my business partner. I mean, it's not ahimsa. So, moderation, not causing injury as much as possible. Now one more thing in this subject. Injury is not necessarily physical injury. Not necessarily physical injury. If I slap you, then I'm not the type. Suppose I slap you, that slap, the pain of the physical slap will be forgotten very fast because it will disappear. But the hurt will remain in your mind. In fact, sometimes you are more hurt by words than by action. If somebody says something which deeply affects you, 50 years I can carry it with me, saying, this is what that person said. Even when I wake up at midnight to go to the toilet, this is what this person said. It's there in my mind. So this injury by words, thought, manasa, vacha, karmana, thought, word or deed. Try as much as possible to refrain. Don't think that I don't need all this, I can meditate. No, you cannot meditate. So, follow the rules and regulations. So these are the yama niyamas. One is this: try as much as possible not to cause injury to other living beings. 2, I'm generalizing. Stick to the truth. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to say that for 12 years, if somebody can remain without uttering even a single lie, after 12 years, even if he by mistake says something that is not truthful, it will happen. Now in this world it is so difficult to do that. Because we live in a world of lies, right? Not LICE lies, I mean. We live in a world of lies, where everything is a lie. Advertising company is a complete lie. This is the best soap. May not be. We are influenced to think so. If every morning and evening you see a soap appearing, Pierce or something, I'm not, please, no brand. You might even forgotten about it. When you go to the supermarket or to the mall, automatically your hand will go to that soap because So, try to, well, you can't get out of it now. We are caught in that maze. But understand it at least and don't think it is true. That much, yes. Also, as much as possible, try also to speak the truth. Unless you think you are going to be murdered if you say the truth, then keep quiet. Try not to tell a lie. Unless you are a lawyer. Nothing against lawyers, I'm joking. But true, it's the profession, so you can't help it. There's one more profession, I don't want to say that here, where you have to lie all the time. You have to think one thing and say another thing on the microphone. So, one is, as far as possible, don't cause injury to other living beings. Second, have moderation in everything, in all action and in all thought, have moderation. And try to stick to the truth. The reason being, if we are going to find the truth, ultimate, absolute truth, and if I spend 24 hours of my life, 24/7, only in a lying world, can I really find the truth? What a contradiction it is. Not possible. So after hearing all this, most people would say, we won't register for Kriya, it's not going over. Believe me, it's possible to do this by most average human beings. If you already have these perfections, then you don't have to do any Kriya, you're done already. So, saying that we are beginners, we want to keep improving yourself step by step until you probably reach there. So, yama, niyama. Then you have asanas, the postures. In Kriya also we have a couple of postures. What are postures? How do postures affect you? Yoga asanas are not merely physical exercise. Yoga asanas are to do with also your endocrine system. Many of the asanas are made in such a way that they affect the ductless gland system which you have in your body, which also even decides the way your thought moves. See, when you say, I'm very happy, my mind is calm, I'm enjoying. What happens in the body? A little bit of serotonin is released into the bloodstream by the endocrine glands and you feel very happy. When you are in deep meditation and you feel happy, if you check your blood, you will find a little more serotonin than normal. You are not using the chemical, you know how to trigger it. So there is a connection between the physical and the mind. And from the mind to the self, inner self. So since we are body-minded, all of us, most of us are body-oriented. So we need to change the body's functions a little bit so that the mind functions begin to change. And for that, you need to change the balance of the chemicals in the system, and yoga helps. That is why in many of the yoga asanas, sometimes you have to raise your legs and put your head down, because rarely there is good circulation of blood in the head. Rarely. Especially people who are too proud can never have circulation of blood in their head. They never bend down. Bend down a couple of times. You don't have to bend down to anybody. Shut the door and keep bending down. Nobody is there. You'll get good circulation in your head. And it's very important to have a subtle mind to be able to have good circulation in the brain. In fact, in extreme cases, teachers are known to have caught somebody and tied them upside down on a tree. So they're hanging. I don't do that. There aren't enough trees anyway. So, this, so what did I say? Asana. So also if you look closely at asanas, you'll see that most of the asanas are to do with the spine. Either they are bending this way or they are bending this way. Because in the practice of Kriya, the spine is a very important aspect, a part. The spinal cord as well as the what is it called? No, the bones. Vertebral column. Both are important, that they remain steady and straight. And that when you sit down to meditate for long periods of time, you don't have pain in the back and this and that. Much of our back pain is because from childhood we have been leaning. Ask somebody, what is your idea of relaxation? Sit in a sofa where you sink in. Do that all your life, your spine becomes jelly. You have no strength to hold it up. If you give me a nice leaning sofa to sit here and talk to you, my mind would probably slip into sleep. I'm steady, so I'm okay. And believe me, I have no back problem. I'm 70 now. Because, hopefully, not in the near future. So, the other thing about yoga, if you look closely at the yoga postures, you'll see that what happens is some part of your body is tensed first. Tensed, T-E-N-S-E-D, tensed. And then let go, relaxed. After asanas, what do? Shavasana, complete relaxation. What happens is, whenever some part of the body is tensed and then relaxed, energy flows into it. This is the principle. And plus, lastly, many of the asanas have something to do with the pineal gland, pituitary and the rest of the cerebrospinal system, including the endocrine glands. Of course, these are all endocrine glands. There's a beautiful chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, the 15th chapter, the Purushottama Yoga, in which it begins by saying, Urdhvamulam matashakam ashvatham bravoravyayam, which means there is an upside down tree whose roots are up above and branches down below. We haven't seen such a tree, because for us all trees have roots down and branches up. Now we are talking about the human tree. The roots are all here. What is the master gland of the human system? The pituitary. And what is it that decides all of the action? Cerebrum. So here is the control point. This is the root. And the rest are all organs, are all branches controlled. So even in the physical way, it means something. So the effect of asana is to bring about a stability and balance of body, so that the mind, when it begins to work towards subtler spheres, is not disturbed by any of these things. That is the reason for asana. You don't have to do all the asanas which have been written, more than 108 asanas. If you start doing that every day, you will only do asanas. You won't do anything else. But choose a few which are good. It's good to do. That is one, that is asana. But in this is also called an asana. You say, I want a soft asana or a hard asana. Not in Malayalam. In the Malayalam language, asana means the bumps. We had great fun in Kannur. There was because most of the people were from Kerala. And there was this good friend of ours, I don't want to name her, from Bombay, who wanted to actually ask me about this asana, for which we are sitting. She said, I have a serious question. I said, what? Do we have to wash our asana every day? I said, all the Mallus started laughing. I said, of course, otherwise they will get all dirty. She didn't understand. So, asana. So these are the postures, physical postures, not this. And then asana, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama. Next step. In Kriya there is also pranayama, Kriya pranayama, which of course of a distinct style, but it's there. So, pranayama, the meaning of the word pranayama, the rules of prana, prana, yama, rules of prana. Now for that we need to know, we need to understand that the human body functions with prana, because of prana. And fortunately for us, the prana is connected intimately to the swasa, which is the breath. So, if you have some way to control or to adjust or to balance your swasa, which is breathing, then you can also control the prana. Therefore it is pranayama. Since we are on the subject, you know that all activities happen in our system because of life energy, prana. According to, we generally tend to think that all the time the breath operates equally from both the nostrils. Wrong. According to Yoga Shastra, sometimes it's more on the left and sometimes more on the right. When it's perfectly balanced, then the mind enters the Sushumna. We will come to that when we come to Kriya. What I'm trying to say is that not at all times does the prana function equally through both the nostrils. So the yogis have a knowledge which says what activity is better, or what kind of thinking or what kind of activity comes best when the prana or the shvasa, whichever you want to put, are connected, flows through the left or through the right. So if you say, how do we find out whether the left is more or the right is more? It's very simple. You can feel it. If you can't feel it, have a piece of glass cupped under your nose, and you can try it when you go out. Don't start taking glasses out. And then if you do that, breathe out, you'll see two blobs of vapor there on the glass. Invariably, one will be bigger than the other. It could be this or that. So, the one that is bigger is where more of the prana is flowing. The other is less. And there are certain activities and actions which are better done efficiently when the prana is going through the right nostril. All kinds of physical activity, exercise, eating, drinking, sex, bathing, going out for material benefits, everything works fine because when the right is working more than the left. You would think it is illogical. What has it got to do with breathing? Till some years ago we would have thought about it, but now we know that the brain has been divided into the left brain and the right brain. Not it's always divided, but we have discovered now. And some activities are better when the left brain is working, and some when the right brain is working more than the left. The yogi says it can be adjusted with the breath. So, anything that involves physical activity in the physical world works best when the prana is flowing to the right. Other things like music, aesthetics, and so on, painting, reading, all these work better when the left is working better. And when both are equal, then the central channel called Sushumna is open. And then that is the best time to go into inner spiritual matters. It's not just that, the yogi also knows how to change it at will. If he is doing some physical exercise, he would shift it to the right. If he is going something else, aesthetics, he would shift it to the left. And when he is meditating, he would equalize. This is the thing about yoga. It is a systematic, step-by-step procedure. Nothing half-assed. And for new minds, young minds, modern minds, it's a wonderful way to go in, experiment, slowly carry on, step by step. So next time when you are going horse riding or playing cricket or something physical, check up and see if your right is working or left is working. If your right is working more, then you might perform better than when the left is working. But don't show others what you are doing. When I was in the car ashram in Bombay, Ramakrishna Mission, a young man came to me and he said, "Sir, I was a brahmachari there," so he came and said, "Maharaj, I need to Ramakrishna Mission." I said, "I have an interview." I said, "Oh, can you help me out?" I said, "Look, when you go for the interview, make sure that your right is working. You might do better because it's a material thing, do it. And you'll feel more confident, there's more positive energy. Make sure that this is open." He said, "Okay." I asked him where was he going for an interview. So it turned out that I knew the boss who was going to interview. So I called him up and I said, "This boy is coming, he's a very good fellow, young man. Everything else is fair, but don't, neglect him. If he's good, give him the job." He said, "Okay." So this boy went and he came back. I said, "How did it go?" He said, "I think mil jayega." Boss was happy with me. So I called up boss, "What's happening?" He said, everything is okay with this boy, but he seems to have some problem." I said, "What is the problem?" "Whenever he's talking to me, he's sitting like this." He says, "He's quite all right." Then suddenly I say, "So what do you think about this? How do you solve this?" He says, "Wait a minute, sir." So, you don't have to be overt about it. You can do it in secret. So, this is about the rules and regulations of prana. Plus, fact is that your breathing rate is intimately connected with your state of mind. Very intimately. You can find out. Suppose you are very agitated. Ancient science of pranayama is derived from these understandings. Suppose you are angry. Okay? How do you breathe when you are angry normally? Very angry, इसको साले को मार देना चाहिए. Agitated. It's also same when you are physically into something which is very physical and very biological. Also you breathe very hard, very fast. On the other hand, when you are meditating or you are listening to beautiful music or you are relaxing, just for a second shift your attention to your breath. You'll find that it's very slow, quiet. So, the rishis said, if the state of mind is reflected in the rhythm of the breath, isn't it possible to change the rhythm of the breath and affect the state of the mind? From this came the entire science of pranayama. So that you regulate and systematize the way you breathe and the rhythm with which you breathe and the speed with which you breathe and bring about the quietness of mind that is required in the other way. This is another important thing about pranayama. what we are aiming to do in Kriya Yoga, I will discuss tomorrow morning when we start with theoretical understanding of what we are doing. Because we don't have much time. We have tomorrow and day after. But I wanted all this before we started, some understanding of why are we doing all this. This is pranayama. And then there is the next step in Ashtanga Yoga is what? There must be some pratyahara. Pratyahara, which means the capacity of the yogi to switch on and switch off at will. And some people call it sense withdrawal. I mean, that's a very literal translation of pratyahara. A pratyahara means the capacity the yogi builds up through practice of being able to fix one's attention on something and in that short notice shift it back to something else or pull it out from there. This switching on and switching off is of great help. When the yogi is driving, he is not meditating. That I don't have to tell you how dangerous it is. And when the yogi is meditating, he is not thinking about his car. Meditating. When you are at home, you are thinking about your wife or husband. You are not thinking about your guru or meditation. Well, if you do that, many problems are solved. When you are here, you are thinking about the teacher and what is being taught. Can we switch off? Not thinking, oh, maybe he has still come from office. So this capacity to switch on and off, you are externally engaged in the outside world. Can you switch off and go within? This capacity, it comes through practice, constant practice. Everything requires practice. Is the meaning of pratyahara. Many of you must have heard my talks on YouTube, right? No? YouTube or iTube? YouTube. Have you heard about the Zen Master story? You want to say it or I shall say it? If you already seen it on YouTube, then you know it. There's no point. Really? How many times have I tried? Yoti-ji. Okay. Do you know that? How many of you know about Zen? Many of you know about, no? No, it's a big fashion nowadays. Because like you keep saying all dhyana, no effect. Zen, it's nice, it's made in Japan, so must be nice. In Malayalam we have a saying, muttatte mulle ki manamilla. That means the jasmine that grows in your own garden, it has no fragrance. The other fellow's garden is very nice. So anyway, Zen. So the founder of Zen, the teacher of Zen, was Bodhidharma. And Bodhidharma was from the south of India, Tamil Nadu actually, from Tanjore. So you must have seen Tanjore paintings and so on. Tanjore. So he's also the founder of the self-defense systems which have now become the Japanese systems. Anyway, that is a different subject. So when Bodhidharma introduced a particular kind of meditation, not meditation, a teaching which laid a lot of stress on practical meditation, not just theory. He called it the dhyana, which is the word used for meditation. He called it dhyana meditation. Dhyana Buddhism. It became dhyana Buddhist teachings. Then he went to China. He didn't go to Japan, he went to China. So when he went to China, the dhyan in the Chinese language became Chan. And then when it was exported to Japan, Chan became Zen. This is a language. So this is Zen. Anyway, so it is said that when Bodhidharma was in China, living on the top of a hill, 3 young men went looking for him to learn Zen. You must understand, those days, no internet, no Google Maps, no Maid-Shri M portals, no nothing. No telephone, no Zen, nothing. So they had to search and search and search. And finally they arrived after 3 days of no food, clothes all torn, looking, climbed up the hill and they saw the master. So they saw the master. When they went up, the master was having his single meal of the day. He had a bowl in his hand and he was drinking his soup. These 2-3 fellows went up and said, bowed down and said, "Sir, we have come from so far, look at our state. We haven't had food for many days. We are suffering. We have only one thing to know." What? We want to know Zen. With all this difficulty, we have come to learn Zen. Please give us the experience of Satori. The Satori is what we might call Nirvana or Samadhi. So, in Zen. So the master said, he didn't even look. Said, "I'm drinking my soup." I don't know if you've seen paintings of Bodhidharma. Quite fearsome looking guy. He said, "I'm drinking my soup." They waited. Then they found this drinking soup is non-stop, it's going on. So then again they asked him. He said the same thing. Third time when they asked him, he called an assistant and said, "Give them their soup." So they ended up holding 3 bowls with soup. While they were drinking it, they said, "What a silly thing happening to us. We came to know Zen and to experience Satori, we are sipping soup." So they again asked him. He again said, "I'm drinking my soup." So they got very irritated and they said, "We are also drinking our soup." So the master put his bowl down, he had finished. And said, "See, the problem is, you are not drinking your soup. You are drinking your soup and thinking of Zen. I am drinking my soup. I'm drinking my soup. I'm drinking my soup. This is Zen." You know what I mean? You know what he meant? Unpointed attention in what you're doing. Even through drinking soup you can reach there if you have one-pointed attention. That is why you keep on drinking soup. What I mean is, one-pointed attention in whatever activity you do and the capacity to instantly shift whatever you're doing next. If that is learned, then one has become a yogi. He is not caught up in anything, he or she. So this is pratyahara, roughly. I'm just giving you a rough. Then comes dharana, dhyana, samadhi, 3. So just note this. It's only after yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara that dharana, dhyana and samadhi starts. So we need to prepare ourselves if we need to go the yogic way, step by step. And Kriya Yoga is an intrinsic part of the Yoga Shastra. So therefore there must be many Kriyas, there can't be one. Different Kriyas. Except that when I say Kriya, I'm talking about that particular Kriya which has come down to me from a certain tradition. That's it. There must be other Kriyas. So, it's 5:30. So tomorrow morning as soon as we come. No, but first we have a meditation and so on. The first part of the satsang would be a discussion on dharana, dhyana. And then we will start the practical understanding of kriya, the theoretical understanding of kriya, and then reach samadhi. No, we won't, but we can try. So, you got it now? Roughly. Some idea. Yes, and in between there are some time where you can have Q&A, so that you can clear your doubts before you go, at least for the time being. Because when you come again, you'll have more doubts. We'll sort it out at that point. So, thank you very much. I hope I'm doing a good job. Not wasting your time for 2.5 days. So what is the next thing? So before meditation we'll light the lamp, and then instead of me lighting the lamp, I'll stand around and get some beautiful butterflies from here to right. Okay, bye. See you.